a few words. Let's get a
Yeah,
few definitions out of the way,
yes.
maybe. So,
Yeah.
what do you like? Who can be? What is a celebrity? Like, who can be called a celebrity? What do you think?
I think it's a difficult question because it's a really elastic term. I used to say to my students that there is a relationship between celebrity and stardom. I think today we don't really see much in the way of stardom. There are and have been many popular articles recently claiming the death of the movie star, although I think there are stars in certain fields like sports and music. But I think in general, celebrity is about this concept of being known, but it's not necessarily clear why we know these people. And it points to changes in what we might think of as work and accomplishment. I think increasingly to today, it's synonymous with the notion of self branding and finding paths to sort of circumvent traditional ways of of becoming known for doing something, although there's a long history of that that goes back well into the 19th century. But I think certainly today, this sense of somebody who you know because of their private life, you know because their personality captivates you, you know because they've been involved in some kind of scandal, or they suddenly are being the people who are most tagged and most talked about on social media, as well as the ones who've been most followed. I think today we think of that as being celebrity. I think it also brings into question some of the more traditional definitions about what kind of person deserves to be famous, what kind of accomplishments are merit worthy, what constitutes quote unquote real work, uh, and also the question of what's deserved and what isn't. Because I think also with celebrity, you can become famous because you've really screwed up. Britney Spears was never more famous than when she shaved her head.
I want to get you. So just to make sure if I understood that correctly, which I don't think I have, which is stardom is where you're known for your particular work. Let's say from music or let's say a sports per se. You're known for your certain accomplishment. Maybe scientist also comes under that, where you've done let's say breakthrough scientific work, and then is that fair?
I'd say it's somewhat fair, but I think with stardom, there's always it has to coexist with an interest in the person and their private lives. So the sense of wanting to know more about the person. So I think that sort of that model was supreme for most of the 20th century. Although I don't think that meant that there wasn't the celebrity model. I think the dominant one was you were in a position where there was some kind of body of work, often in a very public environment. So whether that's sporting accomplishments, films, music, and alongside that, people were captivated by something about you, and that was obviously something that publicity departments and publicists and marketing people were working on to develop this interest in the person to help sell the product. But I think that we've sort of lost a lot of the product in celebrity
Uh,
culture today.
so I want just to clarify things for me, which is so are you familiar with David Dobrik?
No, I'm not. I don't. David
Um,
Dobrik. Yeah, actually, I am. The name is familiar. Remind me who he is.
he's a internet blogger. But let me give you a better example. So
Sure.
are you familiar with Logan Paul? Maybe.
Yes, of course.
I'm not completely familiar with Logan Paul, but this is what I know of him. So he's an internet celebrity, but he also engages in boxing. But let's leave the
Yes.
boxing aside.
Yeah.
Just in terms of say podcasting, and then I think the vlogs that he ends up doing, he does a lot of life. Like he shows his lifestyle. Like I mean, there's
Yeah.
some with some events. Maybe. So I view that like as a body of work which is publicly available. Would that constitute as per se stardom? But he's obviously in the internet age, and he's so if you can, what do you think?
Yeah. No, I think it constitutes a body of work. I think it's just we've changed what we consider work. So I think that in some ways, celebrity does have a pejorative connotation. The sense that the sort of question of what does Kim Kardashian do? She does nothing. She's not an actor. She's not a model. Well, she wasn't a conventional model. She's not somebody who sings. She's not somebody who has some notable talent that can either be measured in terms of sales or in terms of actual talent. Uh, Although I think those metrics are always ones that that are problematic. And yet, at the same time, she says she's the hardest working woman in show business. And I think there's a shift with celebrity about what's considered work, whether that's live vlogging, whether it's taking selfies and promoting goods, whether it's doing a get ready with me video, which has been, I think, the big new trend over the last couple of years. Uh, there's obviously work. There's knowing how to place the camera, how to use the circle light, how to use the right kind of makeup, but also when to post, how to tag, uh, coming up with new content day to day. This is all work, but I think it's work that we don't, as a public, even we see as less valid, less traditional work than, say, memorizing lines and performing, writing a song, and being good at a certain kind of sport. Of course, then the flip side of that is, sorry.
No, I'm just curious. Is it because so the way I think about this is so I feel like music and sports and movies, they have like a decent history. By decent history, I mean I think cinema has a history of, let's say, about 90 years, 80 years, 90 years. Music
Over,
obviously has a long music obviously
yeah,
has a longer history than that. Sports obviously, I
yeah,
think I'm not very knowledgeable, but at least 100 years of history, depending on which sport you're picking. So
right,
they seem to have a huge history. So there's a and vlogging and makeup tutorials, TikToks, short form videos. Those are very new. I mean, in terms of short form videos, not even a decade, I think. So is that
yeah.
because these have not really kind of matured as artistic expressions of the person, or like a body of work per se? Could it be?
I think that's part of it, and I think also it's that the illusion that we can all do this too. It's not even like, for example, the earliest films, which were very much like what we see on sites like TikTok and Vine, the old microblogging site, or even YouTube. I think it's a sense that we have these cameras in our pockets. We have the access to means of distribution, and these people aren't doing anything that we don't necessarily do ourselves. If we get ready in the morning, we might put on makeup, we might do fun things with our friends, we might have opinions, we might want to rant about something. And I think that's that sense of the ease of what they're doing as being something that we could do, whether that's true or not, is something that's also part of the marketing, because these are celebrities who are more like us than not. And this is a celebration of ordinariness in a way that I don't think we see. If you're, I mean, I'm not a sports person at all, but if you're a sports star, it's the one form of celebrity that can be measured. You can measure how fast someone runs, or how many goals they can score in a football match, in a way that you can't necessarily measure why Sophia Richie gets traction and somebody else doesn't. There just doesn't seem to be a talent there, although I think there clearly is.
I'm not very convinced by this. I mean, I'm not able to sympathize completely with this, in the sense um so if I look at acting, I feel, I mean, I feel like I could also act, or maybe I don't know. It feels like, or maybe singing. I may not be able to sing very well, but I don't know. In my bathroom, if I can sing, and if I contrast that with, let's say, makeup tutorials, or let's say random TikTok dances, which everybody could do, but there is somebody who is doing it so well that they're able to accumulate millions of followers, or millions of people who appreciate them. I'm not able to make that leap. But maybe it's just me. I don't know.
See, I,
Yeah.
I think it's a cultural thing. I think no matter how good you are as a makeup artist, if we take makeup artists, for example, in Hollywood, they're considered a below the line expense. So it's a craft, it's a skill, but it's not something that the industry says is a great form of creativity. It's not like the above the line costs, which would include the director, which would include the actors, would include the screenwriter. So the above and below the line costs, there's a denigration of the of that kind of labor. So you can be a great cook and a great chef, and you can be doing well on YouTube, but or on TikTok, But I think the general idea is, yeah, everyone can kick around a ball. I mean, we could say there's no real difference between being a great makeup artist and someone who does an okay job in the morning, or we could say there's a huge one. But I think culturally, the culture has these parameters where certain forms of work and certain forms of expression are considered valuable, whether it's because they've been around for a long while or whether it's because we just culturally have this agreement that this has more value than something else. So a makeup artist on TikTok, I mean, obviously, I think there's a problem also in saying celebrity, because some makeup artists are really good and they're micro celebrities. They're very well known in very small groups. They've been able to become entrepreneurs, have their own makeup lines. Uh, they've developed businesses. This is not something to necessarily dismiss, but I think culturally it's just seen as less significant than the person who has a skill in basketball and has made his way into the NBA, or a Beyonce who has skills in music and dancing and has managed to separate herself from partly because of her age, but partly because of just how she's been culturally framed. She's not the same as a TikTok girl who has maybe tens of millions of followers and maybe more vital and important for the people in her world. But culturally, I think we would say Beyonce is one of the stars of the in her industry, in a way that I don't know, Charlie D'Amelio isn't a star. She may have all the value of a star for her followers, and may have more followers, but I think culturally, there is that sense of why, when Anna Wintour invited people like James Charles to the and TikTokers to the Met Gala, people say, why are they there? But they don't say, why are they there when uh, someone like Rihanna walks the red carpet or the pink carpet or the white carpet, whatever color it is that year. So I think there is a sense of a cultural distinction that in some ways has once you push on these, as you said, once you start to push on these distinctions, they start to fall apart. But I think that's precisely why their sort of seeming fragility, then we have this sort of cultural pushback to say this person's labor and skills and expression is valid. This person's is just something we could all do if we had a phone, if we were young and pretty. And there's also, I think, some of that is part of their marketing too, because Charlie D'Amelio is attractive to her followers because there's this sense of imagination that you could be like her, in a way that Beyonce, living in her $200 million mansion with security and very limited access to her private life, just simply doesn't seem to inhabit the same world at all.
Um, I'm not able to sympathize with the last part, but I shelf that for now. So just to make
Yeah.
sure that I understood this properly, in the sense that, so I'll give you an example. So Charlie D'Amelio has, I don't know, north of 100 million followers on TikTok, I think, if I'm not wrong. But I don't think Jim Carrey is even on TikTok. I'm not sure. But I would
No.
assume that, yeah. So I would, but I think it would be fair to say, or at least I would make the claim that Jim Carrey is more culturally relevant than Charlie D'Amelio, even though she has a platform where more than 100 million people follow her. But in the large scheme of things, Jim Carrey is more quote unquote relevant, or in the long run more important, quote unquote important, than Charlie D'Amelio. Is that fair to say?
See, I'd actually argue the opposite. I would say that he had been more relevant. And at some point, I would say he had been a star. I wouldn't call him a has-been. I don't think he's on that. I think he's just now a well-regarded actor who's had some issues in his private life. But I would say, if you were to ask my students, for example, who's more relevant, I think there'd be a lot of them who hadn't even heard of him. And I don't think it's just that he's not on social media, because I think there are plenty of people they appreciate who aren't on social media. Uh, for example, there are personalities like Kristen Stewart who have virtually no social media presence, but who are present in another way in the culture, both through their acting work, but also through their relationship with their sponsors, in her case, Chanel. And by carving out an image that is kind of quirky, starish, iconic, but also at the same time not not something that necessarily needs social media. In fact, the absence of social media can support her stardom all the more because it puts her into that rarefied circle of people who don't need to be showing you what they did in the morning when they got up, or what their pets look like, or talking about their diet practices. But I think this also points to this idea of stardom as kind of, it may just even be the idea of the term. We don't use the term very much, but I think it also points to someone very much like Jim Carrey, who then could be in a book years later and you could say won these awards, was this is an important film, did important work, dealt with these problems. I'd say also another person in a similar category would be Keanu Reeves. But all of this ties into this sense that it's not just academic work, but it's a discourse I've seen in the New York Times. I've seen it online. I've seen it in sort of online magazines. Is stardom itself over? Are we aging out of stardom when our big stars, whether they're a Keanu Reeves or Brad Pitt or an Angelina Jolie, or even someone like Robert De Niro, are people who are in at the very youngest Gen Z and older, sorry, Gen Z, Gen X and older millennials, going right up into baby boomers. Whereas the term celebrity, I think, in some ways catches on because it does have this sense of being more connected to the now, whatever that might mean. I think these are really fungible terms. I mean, this is a distinction I set up in class in some ways just to sort of break it down. I also think words have their own fashion. They don't necessarily mean something different. We just sometimes substitute a new word to describe the old and world, and another one to make it a distinction between what's going on in a contemporary moment, particularly one like the current moment where, for a lot of people, something very different is going on with fame, but they don't. It's such a complicated, boundaryless, nefarious, odd world that it's very difficult to boil it down to a distinction, because every distinction you start looking at starts to fall apart as soon as you push on it.
Um,